Long before it was a nation with a name, it was a land of vast and silent beauty. Imagine, if you will, a world untouched by maps or borders, a massive stretch of earth sitting quietly on the eastern edge of the great Eurasian continent. This is where the story begins, not with armies or emperors, but with the slow and steady breathing of the earth itself. To the west, the land rose up into the sky, creating the highest peaks the world would ever know, the Himalayas, a fortress of snow and stone that watched over the valleys below. From these frozen heights, the water began to melt, trickle, and gather, forming the two great arteries that would give life to everything that followed. To the west flowed the Yellow River, wandering through the dust and the loose, fertile soil of the lowest plateau. It was a river of golden silt, heavy and powerful, carving its way toward the sea. To the south flowed the Yangtze, the long river, a deep green ribbon winding through lush valleys and misty mountains. Between these two waters, under the gaze of an ancient sun, the seeds of a civilization were planted in the rich and forgiving earth. Thousands of years drifted by in this quietude. There was no hurry. The seasons turned, winter frost giving way to the humid warmth of summer, and the people who walked this land began to settle. They stopped their wandering and looked at the soil. Along the banks of the Yellow River, they learned that if they planted the tiny grains of millet, the earth would return their effort with food. They built homes not of stone, but of the earth itself, digging into the clay to create warm shelters against the wind. They watched the stars wheel overhead and began to understand the rhythm of time, marking the passage of the year by the height of the sun and the flow of the water. Slowly, very slowly, these scattered villages began to reach out to one another. They shared their pottery, painted with swirling designs that mimicked the waves of the river. They discovered the secret of the silkworm, unwinding the delicate threads to weave fabric that shimmered like moonlight. It was a time of discovery, where the mastery of fire and bronze allowed them to cast vessels of profound beauty, heavy cauldrons that sat on 3 legs, holding offerings to the spirits of the ancestors who they believed watched over them from the heavens. As the centuries rolled on like the river currents, a concept began to take shape in the minds of the people. They looked at their world, surrounded by the wild steppes to the north, the great ocean to the east, the jungles to the south, and the mountains to the west, and they felt they were at the center of the world. They were the Middle Kingdom, the land between heaven and earth. This idea became the anchor of their identity, a belief that order and harmony radiated from the center outward. In these early days, they were kings who were more like priests, bridges between the human world and the divine. They ruled not just by strength, but by the mandate of heaven.
It was a simple yet powerful belief that the right to rule was granted by the cosmos itself, and it could be kept only as long as the ruler governed with virtue and cared for the welfare of the people. If the rains fell and the harvest was good, it was a sign that the heavens were pleased. If the earth shook or the rivers flooded, it was a warning that the balance had been lost. This dance between the ruler and the natural world became the heartbeat of their history. The eras passed, known to us now as dynasties, but to them it was simply the unfolding of life. The Shang rulers built great walled cities and left behind the earliest writings, etched onto the shoulder blades of oxen and the shells of turtles. These oracle bones were questions posed to the future, asking about rain, about harvest, about the safety of the night. The script they carved, intricate and structured, is the direct ancestor of the characters used today, a broken line of ink stretching back thousands of years. Then came the Zhou, who spoke of harmony in music. It was during this long autumn of history that the great thinkers emerged, walking the dust-covered roads from village to village. One was a teacher named Confucius, or Confucius. He looked around at a world that felt chaotic and sought to restore order through respect. He taught that if the father was kind and the son was respectful, if the older brother was gentle and the younger brother humble, then peace would ripple out from the family to the state and finally to the whole world under heaven.
At the same time, others turned away from society to look at the moss growing on the rocks and the water flowing around the stones. They followed the Tao, the way, believing that the truest strength was softness and that one should move with the flow of nature rather than struggle against it. But the land was still divided. Many small kingdoms dotted the landscape, each with its own ruler, a vast patchwork quilt of states that sometimes traded and sometimes clashed. It was a time of vibrant energy, but also of fragmentation. The world was waiting for something to pull it together, to weave the disparate threads into a single tapestry. That moment arrived with a man from the western state of Qin. He was a figure of immense will and vision. He looked across the warring states and saw not many lands, but one. With a focus as sharp as iron, he moved to unify the realm. When the dust settled, he stood as the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. He wanted the world to be uniform. He decreed that the axles of carts should all be the same width, so that they could travel in the same ruts on the roads. He standardized the weights used in the market and the coins used to buy grain. Most importantly, he unified the writing system. No matter what dialect a person spoke, the character for sun or moon or tree would be written the same way. This created a bond that held the culture together across thousands of miles. To protect this newfound unity, he looked to the north. There, the nomadic tribes moved like the wind across the grasslands. To safeguard the fields and cities of the Middle Kingdom, the emperor ordered the connection of the old earthen ramparts that different states had built. Stone by stone, brick by brick, the walls were joined. It was a labor of immense scale. Thousands of hands packing the earth, creating a barrier that snaked over the ridges of the mountains and dipped into the valleys. It was a dragon of stone resting along the spine of the hills, a line drawn in the sand between the settled world of the farmer and the wild world of the nomad. Yet the rule of the Qin was brief, a sudden storm that cleared the air for what was to follow. The Han Dynasty rose like a long golden summer. This was a time when the identity of the people truly solidified. They expanded their horizons, looking westward beyond the deserts. Brave explorers ventured out, their caravans of camels laden with silk, tea, and porcelain. They crossed the shifting sands of the Taklamakan Desert and the high passes of the Pamir Mountains, reaching out toward Persia and Rome. This was the birth of the Silk Road, a delicate vein connecting the East and the West. Along this dusty path, not only goods traveled, but ideas. The scent of spices, the art of glassblowing, and new philosophies drifted into the Middle Kingdom, just as the secrets of silk flowed out. The capital city during these times was a marvel of the ancient world. It was laid out in a grid, mirroring the order of the stars. There were vast markets filled with the noise of merchants, the smell of roasting meats, and the color of dyed fabrics. Scholars sat in quiet halls, compiling histories and writing poetry that celebrated the beauty of a plum blossom or the sadness of a parting friend. They invented paper, a humble mixture of bark and hemp that would change the way human knowledge was preserved forever. Centuries flowed into centuries. The empire would sometimes fracture, breaking apart like a clay pot dropped on the floor, only to be put back together again, often stronger than before. The Tang Dynasty arrived as a high point of culture, a time when the capital Chang'an was the most cosmopolitan city on earth. People from all corners of the known world walked its streets. It was an age of poetry, where poets like Li Bai raised cups of wine to the moon, writing verses that are still recited today. They wrote of the fleeting nature of life, of the mist on the river, and the enduring mountains. It was during these quiet nights of history that the inventions of the Middle Kingdom began to shape the future. The magnetic compass was created, a floating needle pointing north, helping sailors navigate the vast, dark oceans. Gunpowder was discovered, first used for fireworks to chase away evil spirits, with bright flashes and loud bangs, lighting up the night sky in celebrations of the new year. The printing press, using carved woodblocks, allowed words to be multiplied and shared, spreading knowledge faster than ever before. And so the story continued, a cycle of rising and resting, much like the breath of a sleeping giant. The Mongols came from the northern steppes, establishing the Yuan dynasty and bringing the Middle Kingdom into a vast empire that stretched to Europe. Yet the culture of the land absorbed them, just as the ocean absorbs the rain. Then came the Ming, who built the Forbidden City in Beijing, a complex of red walls and golden roofs, a palace of silence and majesty where the emperor resided, separated from the bustling world by moats and gates. They sent great treasure ships, massive wooden vessels, sailing across the Indian Ocean to the coast of Africa, showing the flag of the Middle Kingdom to the world before turning inward once again. Through all these changes, the life of the common person remained tied to the land. The farmer still woke before dawn to tend the rice paddies, the water reflecting the morning sky. The artisan still focused on the perfection of a porcelain bowl. The scholars still practiced calligraphy, the brush dancing on the paper to create characters of balance and beauty. The history of this land is not just a list of dates and battles, but a continuous stream of memory, flowing from the mountain source down to the great sea. It is a story of resilience, of a people who, like bamboo, bend with the wind but do not break. It is a story that is still being written, a river that flows on, carrying the past into the future, quiet, deep, and eternal. The river of time flowed on, and the seasons turned over the vast lands of the Middle Kingdom. The Ming, with their great treasure ships and the quiet majesty of the Forbidden City, eventually felt the weight of the centuries.
The cycle, as it always had, began to turn once more. To the northeast, beyond the Great Wall, that dragon of stone sleeping on the hills, a new energy was gathering. These were the Manchus, people of the forests and the plains, skilled horsemen who watched the waning strength of the dynasty with keen eyes. When they entered the pass, they did not come merely to destroy, but to inherit. They established the Qing dynasty, the last of the great imperial lines. Like the rivers absorbing the rain, the culture of the Middle Kingdom absorbed these newcomers. They learned the brushstrokes of calligraphy, studied the ancient texts of Confucius, and honored the rituals of the harvest. Under their rule, the borders of the realm expanded outward, reaching deep into the deserts of the west and the snowy forests of the north, creating the vast shape of the land that rests on the map today. It was an era of immense growth and quiet prosperity. The population grew, filling the valleys and the plains. New crops from distant lands across the ocean, potatoes and corn, took root in the soil, allowing people to live in the highlands where rice could not grow. The markets were busier than ever. Tea, the green leaf grown in the misty hills of the south, became a treasure sought by the whole world. Caravans and ships carried crates of tea leaves, tightly packed, to lands far away, spreading the taste of the Chinese mountains to cups in distant cities. The emperors of this time sought to build a garden of perfect harmony. In the northwest of the capital, they constructed the Summer Palace. It was a masterpiece of landscape, a dream made of rock and water. They dug a vast lake by hand, piling the earth to create a hill that overlooked the water. On this hill, they built temples and pavilions that caught the breeze. It was a place for the emperor to escape the heat of the summer and the rigid walls of the forbidden city, a place to walk along the long corridor, a covered walkway painted with thousands of scenes from legends and myths, listening to the water lap against the marble boat that would never sail. Art flourished in these days. The kilns fired porcelain of such delicate blue and white that it seemed to hold the light of the sky. Writers penned great novels, sprawling stories of families and fates, like The Dream of the Red Chamber. In this book, the author captured the details of daily life, the rustle of silk robes, the scent of incense, the falling of petals in the courtyard, and the quiet sorrow of passing time. It was a mirror held up to the society, reflecting its beauty and its fragility. But the world outside was changing. The slow rhythm that had governed the Middle Kingdom for thousands of years was meeting a faster, more mechanical beat. Ships arrived from the west, not just to trade, but to demand. They brought with them the steam engine and the clock, machines that measured time not by the sun, but by the ticking of gears. The encounter was difficult, like two strong currents meeting in a narrow channel.
The old ways, the belief that the Middle Kingdom was the center of the world, were challenged by new maps and new powers. Yet, even as the political structures began to creak under the pressure of the modern world, the life of the land remained constant. The Yellow River still carried its golden silt to the sea. The Yangtze still wound through the three gorges, where the cliffs rose like walls of iron on either side. The farmers still celebrated the spring festival, hanging red lanterns to call for good fortune, and lighting firecrackers to wake the earth for the coming year. The reverence for the ancestors remained, the quiet bowing before the tablets, the burning of paper offerings, to ensure that those who had passed were cared for in the spirit world. The dynastic cycle, which had turned like a great wheel for millennia, finally slowed to a halt. The last emperor, a child in the vast halls of the palace, stepped down, and the age of emperors ended. It was a moment of profound silence, the closing of a book that had been written over thousands of years. The dragon throne sat empty, and the gates of the forbidden city, once closed to all but the chosen few, eventually opened to the gaze of the common people. But the end of the emperors was not the end of the story. The history of this land is not defined only by who sits on the throne, but by the people who walk the earth. The resilience that had seen them through floods and droughts, through the rise and fall of kings, remained.
The spirit of the culture, the love for family, the respect for education, the appreciation of a well-cooked meal shared with friends, persisted. In the modern era, the skylines began to change. Where once only wooden pagodas reached for the clouds, now towers of glass and steel reflected the sun. Bridges spanned the great rivers, connecting north and south with ribbons of concrete. High-speed trains replaced the slow plodding of the horse and cart, zooming across the rice paddies and the wheat fields like silver arrows. Yet look closely, and the ancient heart still beats. The spirit of the culture, the love for family, the respect for education, the appreciation of a well-cooked meal shared with friends, persisted. In the modern era, the skylines began to change. Where once only wooden pagodas reached for the clouds, now towers of glass and steel reflected the sun. Bridges spanned the great rivers, connecting north and south with ribbons of concrete. High-speed trains replaced the slow plodding of the horse and cart, zooming across the rice paddies and the wheat fields like silver arrows. Yet look closely, and the ancient heart still beats. In the early morning, in the parks of the bustling cities, Elders still move in the slow, graceful motions of Tai Chi, pushing hands against the air, finding balance in movement. In the tea houses, water is still poured over the leaves with ceremony, the steam rising like a prayer. The story of the Middle Kingdom is a river that has traveled a long way. It has tumbled down the mountains of antiquity, wound through the valleys of the dynasties, and now flows wide and deep into the ocean of the future. It is a story of endurance, just as the Great Wall still clings to the ridges of the mountains, weathered by wind and rain but standing firm. So too does the identity of this land. It is a testament to the human capacity to build, to create order, and to find meaning in the passage of time. As the sun sets over the western mountains, casting long shadows across the plains, the land settles into rest. The lights of the villages and cities twinkle on, mirroring the stars above.
The river flows on, silent and strong, carrying the memories of the past, the oracle bones and the bronze vessels, the silk and the tea, the poets and the farmers. It flows on, a continuous stream of life, forever moving, yet forever the same. To truly understand how this vast land became the Middle Kingdom, we must look beyond the timelines of rulers and gaze upon the landscape itself, for it was the mountains and the waters that shaped the soul of the people. Imagine drifting away from the bustling cities and floating over the heart of the country, where the earth rises up to meet the sky in shapes found nowhere else in the world. Consider the Yellow Mountains, or Huangshan. Here, the peaks are not merely mountains, but granite spires that pierce the clouds. For millions of years, the wind and rain have sculpted them into distinct forms, some looking like monkeys watching the sea, others like lotus flowers blooming in stone. Ancient pines, twisted and garled by the weather, cling to the sheer cliff faces, their roots gripping the rock with a strength that defies gravity. It is a world of mist and shadow. When the clouds roll in, the peaks seem to float like islands in a white ocean. It was here that the painters of old came to understand the concept of the void. They learned that the empty space on the paper was just as important as the ink, just as the silence between words gives meaning to the sentence. This landscape taught the people resilience and the appreciation of solitary beauty, etching a sense of awe into the cultural memory.
Drifting further south, the landscape changes entirely as we reach the banks of the Li River. Here, the earth is covered in a carpet of lush green, and the mountains are not jagged peaks, but rounded limestone towers, rising straight up from the flat rice paddies like the teeth of a dragon. The river winds through them, a ribbon of jade green, so clear that you can see the pebbles on the bottom. For centuries, fishermen have lived here on bamboo rafts, gliding silently over the water at dawn. They fish with cormorants, birds that dive into the water and return to the boat, a partnership between man and nature that has lasted for generations. The reflection of the green hills in the still water creates a mirror world, blurring the line between reality and dream. This scenery has been printed on money and painted on scrolls, becoming a symbol of the natural harmony that the civilization has always strived to achieve. But it was not just nature that defined the land, it was the way the people transformed it. Think of the Grand Canal, a ribbon of water dug by human hands that rivals the great rivers of nature. It was a colossal effort, beginning in ancient times, to connect the fertile rice fields of the south with the dry wheat-growing plains of the north. Millions of workers over centuries dug the earth, moved the stone, and built the locks. This waterway became the spine of the empire's economy. grain barges, heavy and low in the water, moved slowly northward, feeding the capital and the armies.
Merchants traveled south, bringing furs and horses. The canal allowed the culture to mix, binding the different regions together with a flow of commerce and conversation. It turned a collection of isolated provinces into a single breathing organism. Then there is the story of the earth itself, transformed into merchants traveled south, bringing furs and horses. The canal allowed the culture to mix, binding the different regions together with a flow of commerce and conversation. It turned a collection of isolated provinces into a single breathing organism. Then there is the story of the earth itself, transformed into art. In the town of Jingdezhen, the hills were rich with a special white clay known as kaolin. The artisans discovered that if they mixed this clay with stone and fired it at incredibly high temperatures, it transformed. It did not just become hard pottery, it became porcelain. It was white as snow, thin as paper, and rang like a bell when struck. They painted it with cobalt blue, drawing dragons chasing pearls, phoenixes flying through clouds, and scholars sitting under willow trees. This porcelain was not just for use, it was a statement of perfection. When these vessels made their way along the Silk Road to the courts of Europe and the Middle East, they were viewed as miracles. The world came to know the country by the name of this product, China, linking the identity of the nation forever with the beauty of its earth. Let us not forget the quiet ritual that binds the day together, the story of tea. High in the misty mountains of the south, where the air is cool and damp, the tea bushes grow in neat terraced rows. For thousands of years, hands have plucked the tender top leaves in the early spring. The processing of these leaves is an art form, rolling them, drying them, fermenting them to create green tea, black tea, oolong, and pu'er.
The act of drinking tea became a cornerstone of social life. It was served to guests as a sign of welcome. It was drunk by monks to stay awake during long hours of meditation. It was sipped by poets seeking inspiration. The tea house became the living room of the community, a place where news was shared, business was conducted, and disputes were settled. The simple act of pouring hot water over dried leaves created a moment of pause, a shared breath in the busy rush of life. And guarding all of this was the spirit of the written word. The calligraphy brush, made of animal hair and bamboo, is soft and flexible. To write with it requires a steady hand and a calm mind. You cannot erase a stroke once it is made. The ink sinks into the paper, permanent and bold. The characters themselves are pictures of meaning. The character for rest is a person leaning against a tree. The character for good is a woman and a child. This writing system connected the past to the present. A scholar in the modern day can read a poem written 1,000 years ago and hear the same voice, feel the same emotion. It is a thread of ink that runs through the entire tapestry of history, stitching the centuries together. As the wheel of history turned, the people also looked to the stars. Ancient astronomers built observatories to map the heavens. They recorded the appearance of comets, which they called broom stars, and noted the spots on the sun. They created calendars that tracked the moon and the solar terms, telling the farmers exactly when to plant the seed and when to harvest the grain. They understood that life on Earth was a reflection of the movements in the sky, a philosophy of connection that permeated everything. They built their cities in alignment with the compass points, facing south to catch the warmth of the sun and turning their backs to the cold north winds. Even the food tells the history of the land. In the north, where the climate is dry and cold, the people ground wheat into flour to make noodles, dumplings, and steamed buns, hearty food to warm the body. In the south, where the rain is plentiful and the weather warm, rice became the staple,
accompanied by fresh vegetables and fish. The cuisine is a map of the geography, a delicious record of what the land provides. The blending of these flavors, the balance of hot and cold, sweet and sour, is another expression of the desire for harmony, known as yin and yang. So how did it become China? It happened through the slow accumulation of all these layers. It was the farmer tending the yellow earth, the soldier standing watch on the stone wall, the merchant guiding his camel through the sand, the artist brushing ink onto silk, and the mother pouring tea for her family. It was the unifying force of a written language that crossed dialects, and the moral compass of philosophies that taught duty and compassion. It was the ability to absorb new ideas and make them their own, to fall and rise again, always keeping the core of the culture intact. Now imagine the night falling over this vast land. The sun dips below the horizon in the west, leaving a glow of purple and orange over the mountains.
The lights of the cities begin to shimmer, millions of them, like a sea of stars on the ground. The great rivers, the Yellow and the Yangtze, continue their journey to the ocean in the darkness, their waters moving with the same steady rhythm as they did 5,000 years ago. The history of this place is not over. It is a long, continuous scroll that is still being unrolled. It is a story of a people and a place that have become inseparable, a civilization that is as deep as the ocean and as old as the hills, resting quietly now under the blanket of the night, waiting for the sun to rise on another day in the Middle Kingdom. As the centuries deepened, the heartbeat of the Middle Kingdom grew stronger, pulsing with a rhythm that would soon be felt across the entire known world. There came a time when the curiosity of the land could no longer be contained by its borders, a time when the desire to know what lay beyond the setting sun sparked one of the greatest adventures in human history. It began during the Han Dynasty, a golden era when the emperors looked west and saw not just danger in the shifting sands, but opportunity. They sent envoys into the unknown, men of courage who walked into the vast emptiness of the Gobi and the Taklamakan deserts. Imagine the silence of those deserts, a silence so profound it seemed to ring in the ears. The wind sculpted the dunes into waves of sand that stretched to the horizon, a golden ocean frozen in time. It was here that the Silk Road was born, not a single paved highway, but a shifting network of trails woven together by the footsteps of camels and the dreams of merchants.
Picture a caravan setting out from the Jade Gate, the final outpost of the empire's protection. The camels, shaggy and stoic, plodded forward with a slow, rocking gait, their heavy hooves padding softly on the earth. They carried bales of silk, rolled tight and bright as gemstones, crimson, indigo, and saffron, destined for kings and queens in lands they would never see. The journey was measured not in miles, but in moons. By day, the sun beat down with an intensity that shimmered the air, turning the horizon into a mirage of water that never existed. By night, the desert transformed into a theater of stars. The air turned crisp and cold, and the travelers would huddle around small fires of dried brush, the flames casting long, dancing shadows against the dunes. Above them, the Milky Way stretched like a river of diamond dust, a celestial guide that pointed the way west. In these quiet moments, stories were swapped between strangers, a merchant from the Middle Kingdom sharing tea with a trader from Persia, exchanging words in a mix of languages, finding common ground in the warmth of the fire and the shared hope of safe passage. They passed through oasis towns that glittered like emeralds in the dust, Turpan with its vineyards watered by underground channels that brought snowmelt from the distant mountains, Dunhuang, the gateway where weary travelers gave thanks for their survival. Here in the cliffs outside the town, monks and artists carved hundreds of caves into the soft rock.
They filled them with statues of the Buddha and painted the walls with swirling murals of flying apsaras and celestial musicians. These caves became a library of the spirit, a place where the prayers of thousands of travelers saturated the stone, creating a sanctuary of peace on the edge of the wilderness. As the road wound further west, crossing the high, breathless passes of the Pamir Mountains, known as the roof of the world, the goods of the east flowed out, and the treasures of the west flowed in. It was not just gold and silver that returned, but new seeds, walnuts, pomegranates, and grapes that would take root in the soil of the Middle Kingdom. And more importantly, ideas traveled this road. Buddhism walked slowly across the mountains from India, bringing with it the scent of sandalwood and the philosophy of compassion, blending with the native Taoism and Confucianism to create a spiritual tapestry that was uniquely Chinese. This exchange reached its zenith during the Tang Dynasty, a time often whispered about as the high noon of civilization. The capital, Chang'an, was the largest city the world had ever seen. It was a grid of order and magnificence, its wide avenues lined with trees. If you walked those streets, you would hear a symphony of languages. You would see robes of every style and color. There were Turkish horsemen, Japanese scholars, Persian dancers, and merchants from Arabia. It was a city that did not fear the outside world, but embraced it. The night markets were alive with the glow of lanterns and the smoke of charcoal grills. Music floated from the wine shops, the plucking of the pipa and the trill of the flute mingling with the laughter of poets. It was in this era that poetry became the breath of the nation. Men like Li Bai and Du Fu did not just write rhymes, they captured the soul of the moment. Li Bai, the wanderer, would sit by the river, a cup of wine in hand, and write of the moon's reflection in the water, of the sadness of parting, of the sheer joy of being alive. His words were simple, yet they held the weight of the mountains. Du Fu wrote of the suffering of the common people and the beauty of the spring returning to a ruined city. These poems were memorized, recited, and passed down, becoming a shared language of emotion for millions of people across centuries. As the wheel turned from the Tang to the Song dynasty, the energy of the land shifted from expansion to introspection. The people turned inward, focusing on the refinement of life. The chaotic energy of the frontier gave way to the quiet contemplation of the garden. The scholars of the Song did not seek to conquer the world, they sought to understand it. They looked at the bamboo swaying in the wind and saw a lesson in flexibility. They looked at the plum blossom blooming in the winter snow and saw a symbol of endurance. It was a time of quiet brilliance. In the workshops and studios, the mind of the Middle Kingdom was hard at work. They invented the movable type, carving characters onto small blocks of clay, allowing books to be printed and knowledge to spread like seeds in the wind.
They refined the magnetic compass, a small needle floating in water that always found the north, a tool that would eventually unlock the oceans of the world. They mixed sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter to create gunpowder, initially used to turn the night sky into a canvas of fire and light during festivals, chasing away the darkness with joy. The cities of the Song were marvels of sophistication. Restaurants served cuisine from every corner of the empire. There were tea houses where storytellers spun tales of ancient heroes, holding the audience captive with nothing but a fan and their voice. There were shops selling fine paper, incense, and intricate fans. People began to bind their books, collect antiques, and paint landscapes that were not just maps of the land, but maps of the mind. Misty mountains that faded into nothingness, inviting the viewer to step into the painting and lose themselves. Then the rhythm changed again. The Mongols swept in, establishing the Yuan dynasty, connecting the Middle Kingdom to a vast empire that stretched to the Danube.
But the land with its deep roots eventually reclaimed its own destiny with the rise of the Ming. The Ming looked out at the ocean and saw a blue frontier. They built a fleet of ships the size of which the world had never imagined. These were the treasure ships, commanded by the Admiral Zheng He. These wooden giants were like floating cities, with 9 masts and crews of thousands. They set sail from the Yangtze estuary, cutting through the waves of the South China Sea.
They visited the islands of Indonesia, the coasts of India, the warmth of the Persian Gulf, and the shores of East Africa. But unlike other explorers who came to conquer, these ships came to display the majesty of the Middle Kingdom. They brought gifts of porcelain and silk, and they returned with giraffes, lions, and jewels. It was a brief, shining moment when the Middle Kingdom reached out to touch the far corners of the earth, proving that they could navigate the vast blue unknown as well as they could till the yellow earth. Yet the call of the land was always stronger. The ships were eventually burned or left to rot, and the focus returned to the soil, to the internal harmony of the realm. The Great Wall was reinforced, brick by brick. A stone belt tightened around the waist of the civilization to protect the peace within. The cycle of the seasons continued, the planting of the rice in the flooded paddies, the green shoots rising, the golden harvest, the quiet of winter. Through all these ages, the family remained the anchor. The respect for elders, the duty to the ancestors, the love for children. This was the glue that held the history together. Whether in the clay huts of the earliest villages or the wood-beamed houses of the cities, the rituals of life went on. The lighting of incense, the sweeping of the tombs, the gathering for the New Year meal. These acts were not just habits. They were the threads that wove the individual into the great long fabric of the culture. So, when you ask how it became China, the answer is in the dust of the Silk Road and the spray of the ocean against the treasure ships. It is in the silence of the scholar's study and the noise of the market. It is a story written by millions of hands over thousands of years, a story of a people who learned to live in harmony with the moods of the earth and the will of the heavens. It is a river that has gathered waters from many streams, flowing deep and wide, carrying the past gently into the future, under the watchful gaze of the moon that has seen it all. As the great wheel of history turned, it was not just the rise and fall of emperors that marked the passage of time, but the steady, reliable rhythm of the seasons. In the Middle Kingdom, the calendar was not merely a way to count days. It was a map of the heavens, a guide for living in harmony with the natural world. This lunar calendar, based on the waxing and waning of the moon, dictated the pulse of life for every farmer, merchant, and scholar. The deepest beat of this rhythm was the spring festival. Imagine the land in the grip of winter. The fields are frozen and brown, the trees bare against the gray sky. It is a time of waiting. But as the new moon approaches, a transformation begins. It starts in the kitchen, the heart of every home. The air fills with a savory scent of pork and cabbage, the sharp tang of vinegar and ginger. Families gather, traveling from far and wide to be under one roof, a migration of love that pulls people back to their roots.
They sit together to wrap dumplings, shaping the dough into small crescents that look like ancient silver ingots, sealing good fortune inside each one. There is an old story whispered to children on these nights, the legend of the neon. It was said that a beast lived in the deep ocean or the high mountains, a creature of darkness that would come down at the end of the year to devour the harvest and the village. But the people discovered that the beast feared 3 things: the color red, the light of fire, and loud noises. So they painted their doors red, hung red lanterns that glowed like warm embers in the night, and threw bamboo into the fire until it cracked and popped with a thunderous sound. The beast fled, and the village was safe. To this day,
The red paper couplets pasted on door frames and the crackle of fireworks are echoes of that ancient victory, a promise that light will always conquer darkness. When the 15th day of the first lunar month arrives, the celebration culminates in the Lantern Festival. The night is no longer dark. Thousands of lanterns float into the sky, carrying wishes written on paper. In the cities, riddles are written on the lanterns, inviting people to pause and think, to engage in a playful test of wit. It is a night of full moon, of round, sticky rice balls served in sweet soup, symbolizing unity and perfection. The circle is complete. The family is whole. The year has truly begun. But the care for life extended beyond festivals. It went deep into the understanding of the body itself.
In the quiet, dusty apothecaries of the towns, the air was thick with the earthy smell of dried roots, bark, and berries. This was the world of traditional medicine, a system that saw the human body not as a machine, but as a garden. If a person was ill, it was because the wind was too cold, or the dampness too heavy, or the internal fire too hot. The doctor would take the pulse, feeling the subtle flow of qi, the vital energy that runs through us like a river. They used the gifts of the earth to heal. Ginseng from the northern forests to restore strength, goji berries to brighten the eyes, chrysanthemum flowers to clear the heat. They mapped the invisible meridians of the body, lines of energy that connected the toe to the head, the hand to the heart. With thin silver needles, they practiced acupuncture, releasing blockages just as a farmer clears a blocked irrigation ditch to let the water flow freely to the crops. It was a medicine of balance, believing that health was simply the state of being in tune with nature. Deep in the mist-shrouded mountains of Songshan, another form of cultivation took place. Here stood the Shaolin Temple, surrounded by ancient cypress trees. The monks who lived here did not separate the mind from the body. They developed movements based on the animals they observed in the wild, the tiger's strength, the crane's grace, the leopard's speed, the snake's fluidity, and the dragon's spirit. This was not just fighting, it was meditation in motion. They believed that by training the body, they were polishing the spirit. Imagine a courtyard at dawn, the mist swirling around the stone floor. 100 monks move in perfect unison, their robes snapping in the quiet air. A display of discipline and focus that has remained unchanged for centuries. Down in the valleys, far from the temples and the palaces, lay the heart of the civilization, the village. The village was more than a collection of houses, it was a large family. In the center often stood the ancestral hall, a building of wood and stone where the names of those who came before were recorded on wooden tablets. Here, the history of the clan was kept. If a dispute arose between neighbors, it was not taken to a distant court, but brought here, to be settled by the elders over cups of tea. The village was a self-contained world. The weaver made the cloth, the potter made the bowls, the teacher taught the classics to the children who sat on wooden stools, reciting the words that taught them to be honest, to be kind, and to be loyal. As the seasons shifted from the green of spring to the heat of summer, the Dragon Boat Festival would wake up the rivers. Long, slender boats, carved with the head of a dragon at the bow, would race across the water. Drums beat the rhythm, boom, 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 syncing the paddling of the rowers. It was a display of communal strength, a tribute to the poet Kuo Yuan, who loved his country so deeply. The people threw sticky rice wrapped in bamboo leaves, known as zongzi, into the river, a food that is still eaten today, the scent of the steamed leaf bringing back memories of summers past.
Then came the Mid-Autumn Festival, when the harvest was done and the moon was at its brightest and fullest. This was the festival of the moon, the yin to the sun's yang. Families would sit outside in the cool night air, gazing at the moon, eating mooncakes filled with lotus seed paste or red bean. They told the story of Chang'e, the lady who floated up to the moon and lives there still, accompanied by the jade rabbit who pounds the elixir of life. It was a night of romance and longing, a time to think of loved ones who were far away, looking up at the same bright orb in the sky. Through all these centuries, the written word continued to evolve, becoming an art form that adorned the walls of even the humblest homes. Scrolls of landscape paintings hung in the main halls, opening windows to imaginary mountains and rivers. Poetry was not just for the elite. Folk songs echoed in the rice paddies, rhythmic chants that made the work lighter. The mesmerizing sound of the Peking opera began to fill the theaters, a spectacle of color and sound. The actors, with faces painted in elaborate patterns, red for loyalty, white for treachery, black for integrity, sang stories of history and legend. With a wave of a sleeve or the twirl of a flag, they could conjure up a mighty army or a blowing wind, relying on the audience's imagination to fill in the scene. This land, this Middle Kingdom, was a vessel that held all these things: the festivals that marked the time, the medicine that healed the body, the martial arts that trained the will, and the stories that fed the soul.
It was a civilization built on the idea of continuity. Just as the bamboo bends low in the storm but springs back when the wind passes, the culture found ways to adapt and survive. It absorbed the shocks of history, the invasions, the floods, the droughts, and incorporated them into its own long story. And so the river of time flows on, carrying the boat of the Middle Kingdom toward the horizon. It is a journey that began in the prehistoric mists, wound through the golden ages of the dynasties, navigated the rapids of the modern world, and continues into the vast ocean of tomorrow. It is a story of 1 billion lives, woven together into a single shimmering tapestry, a story that is whispered by the wind in the willows and roared by the waves of the Yellow River, a story that never truly ends. As the river of history flowed into the modern age, the pace of the water quickened. The Middle Kingdom, which had rested in the quiet rhythms of the ox and the plow for so long, began to rise with a new and vibrant energy. It was a transformation as dramatic as the turning of the seasons, a spring thaw that melted the old ice and brought forth a landscape of steel and glass. In the coastal cities, where once fishing boats bobbed in the tide, forests of skyscrapers began to grow. These towers, shining in the sun, reached higher than the pagodas of old, piercing the clouds. They were the new mountains of the East, monuments to human ambition and the desire to touch the sky. Bridges of immense length spanned the bays and the wide rivers, connecting islands to the mainland, stitching the earth together with cables of iron. High-speed trains, sleek and white as the cranes of legend, began to glide across the country. They cut through the mist of the rice paddies and bored through the hearts of the mountains, shrinking the vast distances that had once taken months to travel into a matter of hours. Yet, amidst this whirlwind of change, the soul of the land remained anchored in the quiet moments. Walk through a park in the center of a bustling metropolis at dawn, and you will find a different world. The roar of the traffic is distant. Here, under the shade of ancient willows, the elders still gather. They move with the slow, fluid grace of Tai Chi, pushing invisible waves of air, finding the stillness within the motion. They write calligraphy on the pavement, with large brushes dipped in water, the characters glistening black for a moment before evaporating in the morning sun, a lesson in the impermanence of all things. In the corners, bird lovers hang bamboo cages from the branches, and the song of thrushes and larks fills the air, a melody that has greeted the morning for 1,000 years. The culture, too, began to travel further than the treasure ships of the Ming ever dared. The story of the Middle Kingdom flowed out into the wider world,
carried by the people who crossed oceans to build new lives in distant lands. In cities across the globe, from San Francisco to London, gates of red and gold rose up, marking neighborhoods where the scent of star anise and five-spice powder drifted onto the streets. The Lunar New Year became a global celebration, a moment when the world paused to watch the lion dance, the drums beating a universal rhythm of joy and renewal. The story was no longer confined to the land between the rivers. It had become a thread woven into the tapestry of the human family everywhere. As the 21st century unfolded, the Middle Kingdom looked back at its own reflection and saw the value of its ancient roots. The old temples, once quiet, were restored. The dust was brushed from the artifacts, and museums were built to house the bronze vessels and the jade dragons, protecting the memory of the ancestors. The tea ceremony was revived with new passion, young people sitting in quiet rooms, pouring the water, smelling the leaf, seeking a connection to a slower, more deliberate way of life. It was a realization that to move forward, one must know where they came from, that the roots of the tree must be deep if the branches are to reach high. And now, imagine the sun beginning to set on this vast and ancient land. The golden light bathes the Great Wall, that sleeping dragon of stone. It glows warm and orange, tracing the spine of the hills, a silent guardian watching over the transition from day to night. The shadows lengthen across the Gobi Desert, turning the dunes into waves of deep purple and blue. The wind whispers through the grasses of the steppes, a lullaby that has been sung since the beginning of time. In the valleys of the Yellow River, the farmers lay down their tools.
The dust settles. The smoke from the cooking fires rises straight up into the still air, a signal that it is time for rest. The birds return to their nests, their chatter fading into silence. The great river itself, heavy with the soil of the earth, moves silently toward the sea, a dark, powerful ribbon reflecting the first stars that appear in the indigo sky. To the south, the mist rolls in over the karst mountains of Guilin. The sharp peaks become soft silhouettes against the deepening night. The fishermen on the Lee River extinguish their lanterns, drifting on the current, the water lapping gently against the bamboo rafts. The green warmth of the day gives way to the cool, refreshing breath of the evening. In the great cities, the lights flicker on, millions of them, a galaxy on the ground mirroring the galaxy above. But even here, the pace slows. The rush of the day subsides. Families gather behind lighted windows. A mother reads a story to a child. A couple shares a pot of tea. The noise of the world is shut out, leaving only the quiet comfort of home. The story of the Middle Kingdom is a long one, a scroll that has been unrolling for 5,000 years. It is a story of resilience, of a people who have weathered storms and floods, who have built and rebuilt, who have turned the soil and looked to the stars. But for now, the story pauses. The ink is dry. The brush is laid to rest. The moon rises, full and round, the same moon that shone on the oracle bones, on the silk caravans, and on the poets of the Tang.
It casts a silver light over the roof of the world, over the snow-capped Himalayas, over the silent, forbidden city, over the sleeping villages and the dreaming cities. The land breathes in, deep and slow. The river of time widens into a calm, still lake. Everything is at peace. The history, the struggles, the triumphs, they all settle into the quiet of the night. There is nothing left to do. There is nowhere left to go. The past is a memory, and the future is a dream. All that exists is this moment of rest. Close your eyes now and drift on this river. Let the current carry you gently.
floating past the mountains, past the stars, into the deep velvet embrace of sleep. The Middle Kingdom sleeps, and so do you. Good night.